Okay, good morning. Just let me briefly introduce the reason why we are hosting this interview, because within the framework of the 2030 agenda, over 60% of the SDGs target depends on the action and capacity of local governments and actors. And however, the financing gap for achieving the SDGs at the subnational level, exacerbated by the pandemic, the so-called multiple crisis, remains one of the main barriers to the implementation, particularly in developing countries. SDGs localization requires robust local fiscal systems, innovative financial instruments, multi-level governance mechanisms, and partnerships with financial institutions, including national development banks. And the OECD plays a crucial role in comparative analysis, also in the systematization of international practices for the sustainable financing of local authorities, and integrating these experiences is essential to guide reforms and innovation required by the new financing for development agenda and to anchor local policies within globally shared strategy. This is why we are very happy to have Stefano Marta, who is the head of the Smart and Sustainable Cities unit, and he oversees the OECD work on a territorial approach to SDGs, particularly on decentralized development cooperation and city-to-city partnerships. And this is why, thank you, I would like to start directly from the first point on what is the strategic role of the so-called decentralized territorial cooperation in strengthening SDGs localization and also local public finance for SDGs localization in the territorial agenda, to explore the transformative potential of this approach as an interinstitutional approach to promote development at local level. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marco, and thanks for the invitation for this interview. As we are moving closer to the fourth International Conference on Financing for Development that will take place from the 30th of June to the 3rd of July in Sevilla, there is really a unique momentum to leverage the centralized development cooperation as a catalyst, as a tool to mobilize financial resources for sustainable development and for the localization of the SDGs. According to the OECD analysis, while decentralized development cooperation only represent, in terms of ODA flows, 3.5% of the total ODA, these flows, they account in some countries for quite a high percentage. For example, in Spain, the centralized development cooperation flows are 24% of the total ODA, or in Czechia, they are 23% of the total ODA. In addition, we are also observing an increase of the centralized development cooperation volume by 60% between 2015 and 2023. In addition to that, we also need to highlight that the decentralized development cooperation activity in terms of financial flow remains quite underestimated, because we only have in the DAC only 14 out of 32 DAC members are currently reporting on ODA flows distributed through the centralized development cooperation. So the data they present are not making really justice to the importance of the centralized development cooperation. And I would also add a final point that the centralized development cooperation is not just about ODA flow, but these figures are not accounting for the significant non-financial and in-kind contribution that are arising from the centralized development cooperation, like capacity building, peer-to-peer learning, the exchange of knowledge and good practices, and so on. So again, there is a really important role that the centralized cooperation can play in advancing the SDG localization.
Thank you. So, following this attention to the decentralized cooperation, to examine the transfer of good practices to international context, to institutional innovation, what could be the proper way to get this approach based on decentralized cooperation, the proper approach for advancing the SDGs localization? How could be the added value of focusing on this approach?
Yes, thank you, Marco. At the OECD, we have been working on this now for almost 10 years. We did the first report on reshaping decentralized development cooperation for the SDG localization in 2016 in cooperation with the European Commission. And what we have learned in these 10 years is that through this city peer-to-peer learning, exchange of knowledge, decentralized development cooperation can help in terms of financing to overcome some of the barriers, financial and capacity barriers for the SDG localization. What is really important is this benefit of decentralized development cooperation are not only for the cities and regions in developing countries, but also for the provider cities in OECD countries, because there is what sort of return on investment for through this decentralized development cooperation project in terms of knowledge, in terms of capacity, that can help to improve local public services and therefore this translates into better social outcome, including the satisfaction of citizens towards public services and trust in the local administration. So this is why it is so important both for OECD and non-OECD countries, decentralized development cooperation. Three key actions that we are recommending as OECD to make the most of decentralized development cooperation, to use the full potential of decentralized development cooperation to localize the SDGs are: first is the recommendation that cities and regions should focus their partnership, their decentralized development cooperation action in the specific policy area where they have unique skills and knowledge to share with their partner cities and regions. And here I will give you the example of the Basque Country in Spain, that is one of the most advanced region in terms of SDG localization and decentralized development cooperation. The Basque Country for many years had a strong focus on gender equality issue in the Basque Country for policy making, gender equality. And therefore, the Basque government made gender equality a key selection criteria in its decentralized development cooperation project. And now is allocating 20% of the fund to action that prioritize women empowerment and that goes to local feminist organization. So this is the first recommendation. The second one is that legal and institutional framework at the national level and incentives can really unlock and enable the full potential of decentralized development cooperation. A very interesting example here is France, where the so-called Odin-Santini law helped to remove some of the legal and financial barrier to subnational government and water agency to work on decentralized development cooperation, because thanks to this law, they can now use and dedicate 1% of their revenues to decentralized development cooperation activities and to promote access to drinking water and sanitation. The third point for strengthening decentralized development cooperation and its impact on the SDG localization is the importance of monitor and evaluation to increase the transparency and accountability of this partnership. And to address this gap, we started a project, we developed a project in 2023 with the European Commission DG INPA to produce a monitor and evaluation framework for city-to-city partnership to localize the SDGs that includes also a self-assessment framework that cities and regions can use to see how they are implementing their decentralized development cooperation project and actions.
Thank you. Very interesting. Also, the concrete cases you mentioned. You talk about Spain, France, and the European Union level. And we know that the decentralized development cooperation is indeed a notable and distinctive component also of the Italian tradition system. It has historical roots and institutional also recognition with the municipalities, provinces, and regions active in international cooperation since the 80s. And I think that it is interesting what you said, also linked to the Sevilla conference. And you talk about some institutional incentives. So when we think about reforms and incentives, regulatory, fiscal institution needed to enable territorial partnership supported by development cooperation to attract additional resources, including private capital for SDGs localization, the key point could be how can decentralized development cooperation contribute to mobilize more financial resources to support SDGs localization?
Yeah, that's indeed a key point, Marco, and we just released a new report, also in cooperation with the European Commission, that is called Harnessing City-to-City Partnership to Finance Urban Development and SDG Localization. And we are using this also for the city contribution to the Sevilla conference. Tricky message that I would like to share with you in this interview on how decentralized development cooperation can help to mobilize additional financial resources are the following. The first one is that decentralized cooperation can help to improve the framework condition for mobilizing financial resources, and it can do so by facilitating the exchange of knowledge on financial management, on the revenue generation, and on tax collection with cities and regions in developing countries. The second way that decentralized development cooperation can help to mobilize additional resources is by supporting municipality in becoming more attractive for international financial opportunities, such as grants and loans, by enhancing urban planning and local governance. And this can happen through the transfer of skills, through leveraging technologies such as geographical information system, and through climate risk modeling. We conducted a survey in the framework of this project with the European Commission, and 78% of the municipalities that responded to our survey told us that their city-to-city partnership helped to improve local governance, therefore increasing attractiveness for the mobilization of public and private financial resources. The third point is also what you mentioned, the importance of the private sector. And we can see that city-to-city partnership can also help to engage the private sector in the Centralized Development Cooperation Initiative to leverage additional private financial resources, improve the business environment, and to help small and medium-sized enterprises also to grow and to promote local development. Still in the survey that I mentioned before, 86% of the respondents told us that peer-to-peer learning as part of their DDC activities help them to share best practices on financing urban development through the engagement of the private sector. So there is also a potential, an untapped potential to further engage private companies in the Centralized Development Cooperation project. Thank you, Marco.
Thank you, Stefano, for your time, for your contribution, also for referencing these recent publications, because these contributions are particularly valuable in informing and enriching ongoing dialogue around SDGs localization. And I'm sure that your insights are important in underscoring an essential point, the fact that decentralized cooperation is more than just a line of cooperation, it's a strategic enabler. You have just mentioned that it has the potential to mobilize a broader ecosystem of actors, including the private sector. And over the last at least a decade, a lot of words about the need for more engagement, local governments, civil society organization, academia, and the private sector, therefore strengthening multi-stakeholder partnership. And I'm sure that we will follow what are the dialogues during Sevilla, and what are also the results of the engagement of OECD, because particularly on decentralized development cooperation, I'm sure that this approach can significantly contribute to closing also the sub-national financing gap and aligning all the actors with these global priorities of SDG agenda. Thank you again, Stefano.
Thank you, Marco. Thank you.
Okay.